Let's continue the second part of Chapter 9, the Comet, Part 1. Now, inside the big and airy dining hall of King's College, Cambridge, the butler mumbled something in the provost's ears in a very respectful manner, and then gave him an envelope kept on a silver tray. The provost summoned James by making a gesture, gave him the envelope, and told James that someone was waiting for him in his room. On his way to the attractive building, James opened the envelope, which contained a short note in it. It addressed him as Dr. Forsyth. The note informed James that the courier of the envelope is supposed to take him to London that night. It informs him to come right on time and that the arrangements for his one-night stay in London are being made. The writer apologizes for the trouble he is causing to James and asks him to keep the visit completely private. The note ends with a line saying that the meeting is regarding something extremely important. It is signed by John Macpherson, Defense Science Advisor, Her Majesty's Government. In his sitting room, James was greeted by a man wearing a bowler hat standing next to the mantelpiece. The man introduces himself as Johnson, security officer at Whitehall. He gave proof of his identity by presenting his identity card and told James that by that time he must be aware why Johnson was in his room. James told him that he was only aware about things that were specified in the note. James was well aware that it would not be useful to inquire about anything from him. Thus, he told Johnson that he will be ready shortly. Johnson's efficient car, Ford Cortina, took less than 90 minutes to take them to Whitehall. They took another 10 minutes to arrive at the chambers of Sir John Macpherson, and after introducing James to Sir John, Johnson moved away smoothly and competently. Sir John apologizes to James with extended hands for interfering with his routine. He straightaway jumps on to the topic of discussion without wasting any time, and thus gives James a typescript. When James saw that it was the original copy of his paper to Nature, he asked Sir John how he acquired it in a disturbed tone. On seeing James all worried and uneasy, Sir John revealed that he has a friend named Taylor who is the editor of Nature. On the other hand, James revealed that he gave his findings to Nature and told them to publish it instantly. He was surprised. However, Sir John was of the view that the findings were so crucial that they must never be published, provided that they are accurate. James was a type of person who would have never taken any criticism or ill remarks on the degree of correctness of his work, or, for that matter, an order to bottle it up. But he was well aware that Sir John was a respected scientist and wanted to give him a chance to justify his side. Sir John assured James that he had no ill intentions and that James must not take this in the wrong way. He told James that he met Taylor at lunch in the club that day. Taylor showed him James' paper and asked about his views before sending it ahead to a professional referee. Sir John explicitly mentions that he still has an interest in astronomy, and upon reading it, he instantly thought that if James' findings are apt, they can have huge implications. Upon hearing a tone of doubt in Sir John's words, James assured him that his findings are correct and that his reputation is dependent upon it. James told Sir John that if the collision happens, it would cause great damage and suffering, which is why he has been exceptionally careful in his calculations. According to him, with the exception of a few situations, the collision was bound to happen. Sir John asked him about those few exceptional situations. James pointed out that the comet could collide with an asteroid before reaching the Earth, or it might break into pieces upon coming near the Sun, or just evaporate. But according to Sir John, one can't be dependent upon the circumstances that might not even happen, and that they must begin with the presumption that Comet Datta will hit the Earth. He mentioned that generally cometary collisions happen once in around 10 million years, but the next one could happen in a year. James corrected him that it could happen in the next 10 months. Sir John appreciated his rectification and asked him whether what he was saying was correct. There were only 10 months of survival left on the planet. He asked James if they should come up with a plan to prevent the collision. Upon hearing Sir John, James smiled a little and thought to himself that Sir John is typically a public servant and is acting like they have been facing a breakdown of law and order. However, the words that came out of his mouth were quite different. He asked Sir John how they can prevent this phenomenon from happening. Sir John was also not sure about that at the moment, but he was completely determined on finding one. According to him, they required more than 2 people to think about the solution, and thus thought that it would be right to gather the experts from all over the world in one room to look for the solution. This would be done in extreme confidentiality so as to avoid the panic in the world with this terrible news, Sir John said as he looked at the manuscript in James' hand. According to James, getting away with his paper or not allowing him to publish it won't stop the news from coming in front of the world, because someone else will arrive at the same conclusion. Sir John asked him to lower the news impact by adding ifs and buts to make the implication seem uncertain. He even thought of using his network all over the world to stop the news from coming out. James asked him for how long he plans on keeping this a secret. Sir John told him, at least until they deviate the comet. He further suggested that they discussed the specifications of the international conference and asked if they should schedule it after a week. James considered it quite impossible to plan for such a crucial meeting in a week's time, but Sir John disagreed and continued specifying its detail. So it was the end of first part of the Comet.